hizo nyimbo ambazo mnaomba. Kadiri wakati unapotupa nafasi tutazidi kulisikiza. Sasa hivi katika kipindi hiki
I love this song.
Fun and away.
I love this song.
There can be fun in our marriages. Kweli ya Mungu.
Kweli.
Sikiza mazungumzo haya. Na ushiriki msikilizaji kupitia njia zetu zote za mawasiliano.
It's loud. Yeah, continue to this another. Nambani. Kuna nini yangu bodi haiendi chini? Kwa loud. No, still not. See in the headphone too. You're right. Kabita changed. So sorry. Yes, like I don't know where my this is usually the song. I like the song.
So then this session you can share the link as part of the
I'll share the link afterwards. So some people who are not on Facebook, that's why I said try it on the podcast. Because unfortunately we don't have, if we are not on Facebook, we don't have Facebook. So at one point we'll be on a podcast. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, tell people it is grace. You see, imani. I want to remember is grace. Grace, for real. Very something. Trust me, in the background. Huh?
You're the 120.
Yeah, is it? I think so. I don't know. No, 100 and
Cecilia, Yohani kutoka na wimbo huo uliotufikia saa 5 ikiwa katika dakika 13. Msikilizaji, bila kupoteza wakati wowote, naomba tumkaribishe Madam Liz. Naona she's not alone, atakuwa anatueleza mgeni aliye naye. Liz.
Yes, Madam Judy.
How are you?
I'm fine, welcome back.
Looking good.
Thank you
so much.
Asante. Pia unajua pia ulikuwa umepotea kidogo.
Nilikuwa nimepokea kidogo. Alafu sasa majuma mawili yakakuwa kuna live events hapo. Sasa ndio sababu inaonekana imekuwa muda mrefu. It was supposed to be just 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks.
Just 2. Alafu ikakuwa mwezi mzima.
Kabisa.
So happy to see you.
So mimi tumekumiss sana.
Karibu sana.
Karibu sana. I hope ulikuja na mazuri. Penye ulienda.
Yes.
I hope so.
Niangalie uone mazuri.
Nakuona si tulipatana hapo mbele nikakwambia kuna venye siri ambayo unafaa kutuambia ulienda wapi na ulikuwa unafanya nini? Mimi unaweza niambia kando hapo nyuma ya tent baadaye.
I will. Karibu sana.
Asante sana. Na leo niko na mgeni wangu hapa John Akelo. Karibu sana Radio Maria.
Asante sana.
I'm very honored to have you here. Unajua pia unaweza kualika mtu lakini pia akupatie excuse ama akupatie sababu ambayo hawezi kufika huko kwako vile umemwalika. So thank you so much for being here this morning. And before we continue so that mwenye anasikiza pia apate kujua ni nani, pengine nitakupatia fursa ndio tuelezee who is John Akelo. Yes, I know why you're here and I'm very excited.
Yes.
But before I go into why you're here this morning, tafadhali tueleze kidogo who is John Akelo.
Awesome. So good morning everyone. My name is John Akelo. I'm an author and creative technologist. So basically what I do is I specialize in the creative field, coming up with novel ideas mostly for digital and web application development as well. Yes.
So you're mtu wa IT.
Mtu wa IT, but on the creative side.
Creative side.
Yes.
So now in this realm of IT,
yes,
you have written a book.
Correct.
Correct. And this book, let me just read out the title, Creative Thinking, A Journey Through the 8 Facets of Intelligence. hata surely sasa hapo
Mhm.
even facets hata hiyo pia hata mimi sielewi facets ni
So
nini,
when you
na
look at-
nilienda shule
When you look at a crystal or diamond, it's the sides,
Yes.
lustrous sides, the shiny sides of the diamond or the crystal. So each side is a facet, and so if you look at intelligence holistically, it's not one single unit, it's multiple, and there are 8 of them. So that's what I focus on in the book, and enabling the reader to be able to understand each of them and how to use them. And I believe that's going to be the premise of
This discussion. Yes.
today.
Yes, because we're all about making this marriage life practical,
Correct.
you know, and fun. And we
Especially
cannot
fun.
exactly, especially fun, but it also helps to understand the things that can go into this marriage to make it work like that.
Make
So
it
that's
work and better.
better, isn't it?
Correct.
So this is where your book comes in.
Exactly.
So please take us through. So why before we go into why the book, what's creativity? I mean, creativity can sound like, I don't know, like the way kids, we see them playing in the mud and they make a car, they make a ball. You know, what's creativity? I think it gets a bit confusing.
So I think from that perspective, those children having that degree of fun and creating those things is creativity. But from my perspective and where I look at it from the book is intelligence having fun to create novelty or something new or something different, right? That's my perspective of creativity. And I'm not going to limit it only to artistic expression, which is most of the times the case that people bind or bound creativity to, that because you're an artist or you're visually inclined that you're artistic. That's not the only limitation. You can be a creative accountant, you can be a creative auditor, you can be a creative receptionist. It has no limit, but it's understanding the process of transitioning your intelligence to having fun and coming up with novelty.
So creativity is about creating something new.
That's it.
So it's not just the artist who's painting something.
No.
Even
I think that's the misconception.
Even when you said creative auditor, auditors can be creative.
You
Can
can.
just talk about numbers.
Can you make it more efficient? That's something new. Instead of it taking 3 weeks, can we do it in 2? Right? And we'll see how the different layers or the different facets come into play when we discuss that.
So I think also the thing, somebody, when they say creative, they just think of bright colors and, you know, paint brushes and paint, but it's not really understand. It's about just creating something new.
Yes.
At the end of the day. That is creative.
And maybe the reason that's the case is because the majority of the people are visual. And that's the most common form of expression of creativity. So that's what makes people think that is creativity.
That is the only way
form
of this of identifying or defining creativity.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Now that we know what creativity is about, or rather the definition, I think then that will help us understand, because your book, when it says a journey through the 8 facets, meaning
it's a journey.
It's a journey. Ni safari. Kama kutoka hapa kwenda mpaka Mombasa. Tenda tu kisimama tu salama nini? Mariakani nini? Haya. It's a journey. Ni safari. So before we go into the different things that you've talked about in this book, what inspired this book?
So before I even get to the inspiration, let's start at the beginning of creativity. And considering it's a Christian context, let's look at the book of Genesis. So from Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 to 26, God created. And he created a lot in a span of 6 days, right? And what I'd like to emphasize on is specifically Genesis chapter 1 verse 27, where he focused on creating man and mankind. And not only did he create them, but he created them in his own image and likeness and favor and kind. So that means the fact that you have been created by the Almighty Father, you are innately creative. So for anybody who is sitting out there or listening and saying that I'm not creative, just Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 already grants you the ability to
Has already proved you wrong. You are creative.
You are creative.
Everyone is creative.
But you need to understand which tools enable you to be creative, and not only just creative, but at your best creativity. Yes, because not every tool can be used to solve the same problem. So you need to know which one works best for you.
Okay.
And that's where the 8 facets come in.
All right. Yes. So now you've understood. Okay, you've explained the Christian view.
Yes.
So that brings us now to the book.
Correct. So how we ended up writing the book, as I mentioned, I've been in the creative industry for about 14 years. And one of the things I've been able to do is create at a very high volume in terms of ideation, coming up with concepts, things that don't exist. So you told you want something new, how do you come up with it? So I was able to do it, but I was never able to articulate it in a manner such that somebody else can replicate the process. But a bit of a background story, back when I was in school, mostly primary school, I really used to struggle with learning. And the reason is because most academic systems tend to rely on logic and language as the mostly common form of conveying information to children or teaching in school. But those were not my strengths at the time. I was very visual. So I think between class 1 and class 7, I was mostly, if you look at the stream, I was mostly 160. In class, I was 38 out of 40. But what happened is, in 7th grade, I got access to this book by Ben Carson, Think Big.
Think Big.
And I read it. And this book played out like a movie in my head. I could remember all the little details about everything, from how he struggled in school as well, to how he also got his breakthrough, to how he ended up being the world-renowned neurosurgeon he is, including him being able to handle the hemispherectomy of the Banda twins. And it was such a vivid movie. And I was like, okay, class 8 is coming up. I'm able to recall this book. What if I create a movie in my head about geography and how volcanoes are formed, how rocks are formed, and everything? And I realized that by creating these movies in my head, I was able to recall a lot more information. And so between class 7 first term and second term, I significantly shot up from bottom of the class to about maybe 15.
Wow, in that just
by
one time.
creating in one time.
So you're seeing things in
I'm
movies.
seeing movies in my head,
Yeah,
like I'm
okay.
sweating as I'm watching, as I'm recalling the volcano erupting and how the
When
magma
ni movie tu.
transition. Ni movie tu kwa kichwa.
Wengine ni wanaandika, we ni mamovie tu unaona kwa
Movie tu.
kichwa.
And then I realized that, okay, I didn't understand it then, but that was my introduction to visual intelligence, visual spatial intelligence. That for me, I need to picture it in my head. And the more detail I can create of this picture in my head, the more I can recall. But not only do that, I can also manipulate the picture in my head to come up with something different. Yes, to suit what it is I need. So that was my introduction to visual intelligence.
Wow.
And that's when I realized I'm a visual thinker, and that's how my grades transitioned. So move it forward, maybe in campus first year, I started learning about the different types of, it's called the theory of multisensory learning, which sort of touches on this. So it touched on different aspects about how to basically come up with and understand and increase your overall retention capacity. So not only did I learn about the visual, I learned how to put all the others together. And now applying it over 14 years, my colleagues would ask, how do you come up with these ideas? How do you do this? And I said, okay, not only for them, but also for the sake of my nephews and children, I'd like to come up with a structured way of explaining this.
Okay.
And that was the
book. Oh, wow.
Yes.
So now this book talks about the 8 levels of intelligence.
Correct.
And I remember I was asking you earlier, what's the difference between personality, temperament, and what you put across as the intelligence?
Okay, so maybe I could touch on that with regards to the personality. So I'd say the personality and the temperaments are individual components that define who you are as a person. But intelligence is the process through which your mind thinks.
How your mind thinks.
How your mind thinks. So I think that would be the key distinction between the two.
Okay.
And then in this case, we look at the 8 major ways in which your mind thinks, and then how do you put it all together? Yes, to increase your overall creative and intellectual capacity.
Oh, fantastic. So this was, the idea came of the book just to help your colleagues, because they were trying to understand these ideas you keep coming with.
Yes. And
you're making us look bad.
Not really, but ilikuwa inasaidia sana because you're getting ideas, you're starting to move forward. But additionally, I started off as a Zoom training from like 2018. I used to do it online, but it was a bit exhausting because it's not scalable. In my absence, the content can't be relayed.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, maybe I could do a video recording or do an audiobook or write it. So those are some of the things I'm actually going to do. The next stage is now to come up with an audiobook for this, for the people who prefer listening instead of reading, and then also have it as a course, which is also part of the things we're going to discuss.
Wow,
today.
fantastic. Yes. So without further ado, or, because I'm sure people are, okay, this forms, what are these 8 facets? Could you very quickly, because of the time limitation.
Yes, the limited time. Yes.
What are the 8?
So the 8 facets are, starting off, which in my opinion is the most critical, emotional intelligence, which is broken down into 2. Intrapersonal, which is understanding of self, and there's interpersonal, which is how do you relate to other people, and the key component of that is empathy, truly understanding why the other person is the way they are. And considering we're going to discuss this in the context of marriage, that is going to be the pillar of this discussion, empathy.
Yes.
And then we transition to logical, which is the ability to interrogate in sequence and ask a lot of questions. Then we have financial intelligence, your ability to distinguish between an asset, the liability, income, cash flow, all those. And it's a very critical facet. Then we have physical intelligence, the ability to understand how your body works and truly control your body. And then we have visual, which is now most people are visual. At least 55% or 60% of the world's populace is visual. And then we have auditory, people who like now presenters and people who are very good at orating or speaking about certain things. Then we have linguistical, the mastery of language. And as we mentioned, it's very important to not only choose your words because they can create or destroy, but also be very careful how you speak to yourself and others. So that ability to understand language, not only one but multiple, the structure, the syntax of language. And then we have the last one, which is spatial. So this is the people, again, I tend to fall in this, the professional daydreamers. We are constantly daydreaming, always having our heads in the clouds. Huko ndio huko.
Wenyewe ndio mnatumwa kwenda kununua vitu ulinunua maziwa.
Nimepitia pale, nimerudi huko, nikaenda hivi, nikaenda, and then unapata umesahau.
In your daydreams.
In your daydreams, exactly. So those are the 8 facets. And we are all blessed with different proportions or different allotments of each. So what this book does is, as I said, it's a journey. First of all, understand all 8 and then understand which ones are your strongest and work with those. Because one of the quotes I really appreciate is, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb the tree, it will spend the rest of its life thinking it's inadequate. Because that's not its domain.
And that's the thing, because, and especially in school, because you mentioned you struggled when you were in younger days in school. You know, ni watoto wengi wanaambiwa, lakini wewe ni aje, it's how come your brother is doing like this and you're not like this.
Exactly.
You know, they're first comparing the children, and then you're also being made to feel like, mbona ushiki.
Yes, and that's very unfair, because you'll find even in a family, you'll find one child is very good linguistically and logically. Another one is spatial and visual. So by comparing them, first of all, you're lowering their self-esteem, but you're not enabling them to understand that we're different and it's okay. You're not all going to be the same. So even for parents, please understand that your children will be different and they'll turn out different. So understanding again this will also enable you be a better parent, because you understand. Personally, I know my daughter is auditory and visual. So most of the things we do, auditory, visual, and physical, most of the things we do with her learning involve those 3 facets. And she's really flourished because we understand that these are her strengths, right? So God blesses us with another child. I do understand it might be different, so I'll need to alter my approach to their learning and not compare them.
Because it's different. Them.
Yes.
And now what about for a spouse? Because you're wondering, sasa huyu alitoka wapi? And we used to get along so well. Tulikuwa tunasikizana. Surely. What happened?
So it's interesting now, again, which leads us to the discussion of today.
Yeah.
You realize that change is inevitable, but also understanding that we're different. And that's where now that second part of emotional intelligence comes in, which is interpersonal. How do I relate? Because you need to appreciate that before you got into this institution of marriage, yourself.
Yes.
And you're 2 very different people.
Yes.
Must have been 24, 30 years before this person came into your life.
Yeah.
They had a totally different upbringing. They had a totally different set of circumstances that led them to be who they are.
True.
And part of the things I talk about is understanding somebody's blueprint. What were the formative, foundational years or experiences that led this person to be who they are today?
But people don't usually go that deep. Face value.
And that is the infatuation phase. So again, I usually like making a very clear distinction between infatuation and love. Infatuation is when things are going great. The dating, the wooing, the late night calls. But I believe, in my opinion, especially when you get into such a committed relationship such as marriage, that you need to understand that love at times can be uncomfortable.
Oh yes.
You'll have to experience things about someone that you didn't necessarily appreciate, especially when they were not visible. But how do you extend the empathy? Tell the person, I'm here with you. I understand. I'm here and willing to support you through this process. So yes, change will occur, but how do you extend the empathy to your partner? Emotional intelligence, and at a very high level, is required.
And so now, how do I know whether my strength is physical, visual? Because I could be married all those years, 10, 15, whatever number of years, but I'm like, surely, I'm emotional. So me najua tu vile na relate na watu, na vile na relate with myself and how I talk to myself, or financial.
Yes.
But I think financial, like you said, a lot of issues come around
money. A lot
money.
of issues come around from financial.
But how do I tell where my strength lies?
So one of the things I've done in the book is have activities at the end of, first of all, at the end of each chapter, that enable you to understand whether this is your strength or not. So there are activities you'll do, and then you'll rate yourself from a scale of 1 to 10.
Okay.
And then at the end of the book, there's a section where now you put everything together, right? Where now you look at all the different facets that you have and rate them from your strongest to your weakest. Strongest being rated above 8 to 10, and then weakest is anything rated below 2 to 0. That way, you then understand these are the ones I have. So personally, for me, my strongest intelligence is logic. I think sequence, I think
order,
and order.
If there's no order,
if there's
please
no
don't.
order, please.
Yes. Even your food.
Exactly. That's my bangwe. That's logic, and then I go to visual. As I mentioned, I visualize a lot of things, and then also now I've realized auditory is very strong for me. When I speak it out, my retention is high. Right? Then you also need to understand relationships and marriages are complementary games. You need to understand that where my strengths are strong, let's utilize that, and I cover your weaknesses. Where your strengths are high and my weaknesses are low, you cover that aspect. And that's why you need to understand that marriage is all about complementary synergy or complementary effort, such that where I'm weak, you hold the fort. I am strong, I cater for it.
And I think now you bring in the point of don't judge, in the sense that because somebody is not strong in something, yet your expectation was because you're the man of the house, surely you're the one who's meant to be dealing with finances.
Exactly.
But yet that's not your strength.
That's not your strength. And it's okay.
And it's okay.
Yes. Because you could find the man is an exceptional artist. An exceptional artist. He'll draw whatever it takes, but he takes 6 months to finish his artwork. While you are an accountant, CPAK, umefika mwisho, you're at the top of your field, right? It's only fair that have a conversation and extend empathy. Dear husband, I understand that you love your art. I've realized there's a creative opportunity where you could do digital art and we sell it at 1,000 bob a piece. It covers your cash flow for the next 6 months so that you do your masterpiece and sell it for your 2 million. But we have money throughout the 6 months. So we're not cash flow right?
We're not there.
Yes. The financial strength of the accountant will complement the visual exception of the artist.
They complement.
You have to.
So it's just about understanding.
Yes.
Then from there.
Yes.
Now tell me, what if my partner is not willing to read a book like this? Mi nimesoma, nimefanya test, nimejijua, niko hapo visual or linguistic or whatever. Mwenzangu, mtu wangu hataki kufanya hii mtihani.
Piga magoti. Muombe Mungu. Kupatie mawaidha vile utaweza kushughulikia haya mambo. But what I'd say is relationship is first self. Before there were two, there was one. You need to truly understand yourself.
True.
And at times, one of the most unfair things is expecting something of your partner that you cannot do of yourself. So first, GLA. Understand what your strengths are. Then, in the process, as you're extending empathy, you start observing. It's also an observational game. Marriage. You need to understand, okay, this guy is at his best when this and this is happening. And he's at his worst when this and this is happening. Let me try introduce it at his peak. Maybe his team has just won the Champions League and this guy is on top of the table. As I'm seeing, that's what's going on right now. People on top of the table. I think it's Arsenal. Get him at that point.
Get him at that point.
And when he's feeling good, get him at that point. Don't go and tell him when he's stressed, when his team is at the bottom of the table. Then if you realize that this guy enjoys walking, maybe get him at that point in time and introduce the concept to him. Maybe he doesn't like reading, but he enjoys listening. He's auditory. Introduce it to him in an auditory manner. And maybe find out if there's an audiobook content related to what it is you want to convey. So you see, again, remember, we're looking at novel creativity, a novel way of surveying, conveying your
So even you need to get creative. In other words, be creative. In other words, we're saying, in your marriage, please be creative. Si tu kwenda kuambiwa tuliambiwa kunafaa kuwa hivi na yani as the expectations and realities adjust.
And the truth about relationships is no two relationships will ever be the same.
True.
What worked for your advisor might be the worst advice for your relationship. Because again, now you understand people are so different. Right? The blueprints or maybe the connection that those advisors gave you worked for them because there was some synergy and they figured it out. You might do that and that might cause a lot of issues.
A lot of issues.
So read the person and understand them.
Okay.
and figure out what works for them and what is the best time to convey this information and in what format.
So I want to I get that. So be creative, not even just
creative. See what hivi ndio vile imefanywa, hivi ndio vile tutafanya na nilifanya na haikufanya. Adjust your approach to meet the requirements of the individual.
The needs of the day.
The needs of the day.
So I want to take one for example. So physical.
Yes.
So physical intelligence. Yes. So what does that mean? Because you said it's how you think, but now physical and thinking, how are they related?
So let me just expound on what physical intelligence is first. So physical intelligence is the ability to truly understand your body and how it works, right? And I'll give you a very simple example. What's the first thing that happens to your body when you're under stress?
Shut down. I don't know. What
Some
happens?
people panic, some people shut
panic,
down. But what happens to your breathing?
It becomes quicker. Some people becomes quicker.
Right? And you start panting. Exactly. Now, somebody who understands physical intelligence, people who are athletes, sports, what do you notice about their breathing when they tend to be in a very high pressure situation?
I have never noticed. I guess I never paid attention.
Yes. So what tends to happen is they intentionally slow down their breathing.
They slow down their breathing.
Yes. Now what that does is when you're in a fight or flight situation, you tend to breathe very fast. So you're panting. Now what that essentially does is reduces the amount of oxygen your brain gets, and it reduces your thinking clarity. But these top level athletes and these people who are very high level, they keep jogging. Everything is about breathing. So by shifting your breathing from upper chest breathing, which is shallow, and shifting it to belly breathing, you realize you get in more oxygen. And that means that in a situation where you are panicky, your brain now is thinking of how do I get out of this situation, but in a calmer manner, but it's processing faster, right? And then if you extend that now to a situation where you're really stressed, this would be an example of how do you apply physical intelligence to the situation. By changing your breathing, you realize your heart rate will reduce, your thinking capacity will improve, and you'll be able to solve your way out of that, right? So just by understanding something as simple as how your breathing affects your stress level, you can be able to alter your mood. Because have you ever tried doing anything when you're stressed?
It's difficult.
It's absolutely difficult. You get what's called either mind, if you're creative, it's called creative block or mind fog. So everything is very hazy.
So are we saying then, if you know you like running or those things that will require some form of, I don't know, change in breathing because of the physical exertion.
Yes.
If you enjoy those things.
If you enjoy those, and there's also benefits, and especially with regards to physical intelligence, one thing you realize is people who tend to enjoy working out a lot tend to get what's called a runner's or a workout high above the pump.
The endorphins.
The endorphins. So that's usually the release, the release that your body does to sustain that recovery process. But your body feels very good after that experience. So by doing that, I tend to do it a lot. If I'm trying to solve something or I'm under stress, I go for a run. Immediately I finish my run, take my shower, the endorphins take over, and I just feel so relaxed, and I start figuring out what I was trying to do. It'll take me 20-30 minutes to solve something that I was stuck on for 30.
So we're saying use
for a very long time.
So we're saying use these intelligences, different formats of intelligence, not to just solve problems, but also help you in a stress situation.
Absolutely.
So if you're feeling you're stressed, visual, how would a visual intelligence maybe kick in? So
again, remember these things complement each other. So as I mentioned, at the end of it, you'll arrange which ones are your strongest. So there's a sequence in which information needs to be conveyed. So again, I'm a visual thinker. If I need to design something or visualize something, first of all, I can't do it when I'm stressed. So what do I need to do? I need to involve in a physical activity that reduces that stress level. Once that stress level is done, I can then access my creativity through my visual expression. You get, so there's a sequence. And as I've mentioned, for me, if I'm to solve something, the more layers you can add on, the better the outcome.
So they don't work alone.
They don't work individually.
So you get the ones that work best for
together.
You. So you can find it's the physical, the visual, the logic. When you bring them together.
All together. Yes.
I get it.
And the more of them you can work with together, the better the outcome, because you're looking at different perspectives. And I'll give a case in point. You could be the best artist in the world, but you struggle financially. So yes, your art is amazing, it's exceptional, but you're unable to earn an income from it. You need the financial intelligence.
You need the financial intelligence.
But then you then add logic to it. How can I improve my financial capacity? How can I reach more clients? how can I improve my subscription base? That is logic. You're asking a series of questions. Then you visually express it through art. You then add emotional intelligence to it. How will this resonate? Maybe you're doing stuff that resonates to maybe 3% of your target audience. How do I make it have more resonance with a wider variety of people? Now that is putting the different facets, making them to work together to improve your overall financial situation.
Is that where the mind map comes in the book?
Correct.
The visual?
Yes. So mind mapping basically is a visual tool, and I tend to use it a lot. It's one of my most preferred visual tools, where you create, now it enables what's called association. And one of the things about association is you can create connections where none existed. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say we want to come up with something out of the word radio. If we break the word radio down into two, we can have, it sounds sort of like red. Now this is a bit of linguistical intelligence, right? So if I say red yo, in Luo, now I'm applying linguistical intelligence. In Luo, yo means way, but in English red means color. So what if we had a red way? Now you see I've expanded the possibility of the word radio to something else by using auditory, linguistical, and then I can give it to a visual person to tell them, can you give me something that has radio? So on the mind map, I'll write in the center of the screen radio, then I start extending. It sounds like red and yo, but yo in English could maybe be something like informal greeting.
Yeah, yo.
Hey yo.
Yo, hey yo.
And you see I'm expanding the mind map. So I'm starting to create all these different connections with things that are not related, but I'm applying auditory intelligence to visual intelligence. That's how the complementary system works.
Okay.
Yes. So you use them to support each other when you're coming up in the creative process.
So what about, does it sound like something that someone can use on their own? Because it sounds like you need to be guided how to use all these different intelligences to complement each other.
What I'll say is it won't happen overnight. This has been a process. It's a journey. And as I've mentioned in the book, it's a journey. So first you need to understand it. You then internalize it. You then practice it. And then it becomes second nature. So it's gotten to a point where some of these things, like that thing we're doing with the radio, I can do it in my mind without even inquiring of people. But it's because of the hours and hours of practice. Right? Yes. So that's how
So it's a journey.
It's a journey.
So would you encourage a couple to do some kind of, so would a personality test of sorts in their dating days give some kind of hint?
It would.
To some of these kind of things we're discussing.
It would, because again, you remember these things sort of, they interrelate, personality tests and intelligences. But this one now, what it will help, especially with regards to the marriage, is it really gives you some sort of foundation to know what you're working with. There's nothing as bad as you're getting to a room and you're told, okay, so we're here, but there is no table, there's no radio, there's no mic, there is no coordinator, there's no controller, there's no mixer, but you're supposed to run a radio station. But at least if you get a starting point and know what you're working with, you're better off being able to deal with some of the issues that arise, both positive and negative. Correct.
And now that we're talking about this, how do I get this book? Because fine, I've understood that it's a journey.
Yes.
There are tests that need to be done or questions that need to be answered for me to figure out where my strengths lie, and even my partners, if they choose to do it. But even you can kind of vile unamwona, unaweza kumsoma where they lie. So how do I get this book?
So currently it's available as an ebook. It's on Google Play Store. So I believe at the end of this we can share the link on the program.
Yes.
But yes, it's available on Play Store for Android devices. I'll work on the other formats. I'll be working on print a bit later next year, and you'll understand why I use that approach. It was more, again, creative thinking. So for me, it was the most efficient way of getting this book at the most cost productive level.
So, but on Google Play Store, do you just go to
what you
if
can
somebody's they search
Google creative thinking.
Creative thinking.
Or the simplest way to do it is you type PUB full colon, and then you have a space and add DAPA capital D space capital JD. That'll give you the listing of all my books directly, or all the applications.
All books. So the other books.
The other books coming. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the beginning, the first one.
This is the first book. So I have others en route.
So if I go to Google's Play Store and I just look for creative thinking, or if I search with John Okello,
Yes, or DAPA JD.
Or JD.
My developer ID is DAPA JD. Yes, you'll be able to get
DAPA JD.
And that's where that PUB for colon DAPA JD comes.
But the JD is between the DAPA and the JD is an underscore.
Is a space. Yes.
Okay.
Alternatively, we'll just share the link.
We'll share the link as well.
Yes.
But even that price is very affordable.
Yes, and that's the beauty of going the digital route, because as you notice, a lot of things have gone up. Publishing, printing costs, and of course, the overall cost of production has significantly gone up. So those are some of the factors I considered. I went through a 14-step logical sequence, understanding how these are the things I had to overcome. These are the barriers to publishing I had to overcome. Others I wouldn't have written the book. But so the answers I got from that sequence of interrogation is what led me to understand. I've been doing these things for 15 years. I can figure out a way of digitizing
this.
Yes, and that's the approach I used.
And I'm curious, how long did it take you to write the book?
So I'm going to be biased with this. The totality of it is 5 years, because remember, I'd already drafted it in 2018, right?
Before COVID.
But the actual writing took a month. I spared aside 3 hours every night without fail, Monday to Sunday, and wrote until I started writing it in June, and by I think July I was done.
So you'd been writing it down with your hand, with a note, I mean like a pen, paper?
On the computer. So
on the computer. No, before, when you say it was already compiled.
So I had it as a PowerPoint.
As a PowerPoint.
Yes, that's what I was using for the Zoom calls.
So yes, because you said you had content.
Yes.
So this is content you put together in a book.
The outline now, yes. So now I actually wrote the meat of what it was I was teaching. Yes.
Fantastic. So you've done all this. It sounds like a one-man show in terms of what you're teaching us about being creative.
Mostly, yes.
Because
I wouldn't say it's a one-man show. A lot of people have, of course, in the journey I've met a lot of exceptional creative people.
Yes.
Who have nurtured the talent, but it's practice.
It's practice.
Lots of practice.
No, but when I mean one-man show, how you've just conceptualized the book, the design.
Yes, that was our one-man show. Most of the illustrations, the design, the content, the application design, the authoring side of it. There's a dashboard where now I author, so I can also do it for somebody else. If somebody needs to be able to convert their book digitally, I'd be able to do that and then now export it into the application as a book.
Wow. And what does that say about how we're raising our children? Tell me. You know why I say that?
Yes.
The other day, actually yesterday, and I was a bit disturbed when I saw that. When somebody was like, no, you know, this homework, we're making our children do this homework, it's not important. Na unajua hata hii homework wanafanya, most of these jobs that they are trying to study for will not be, they'll be redundant in years to come, you know. They will not be engineers, they'll not be, and I was wondering, okay, what are we trying to say then for how we are raising our children, you know, in terms of this creative way of doing things?
Which is absolutely correct. So as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the things I'm never going to focus on is what my child's grade is. But I want to nurture a passion for learning, lifelong learning. Because even if the job is redundant, do you adapt? This is something that I had to combine 3 or 4 different specializations to get done. They hadn't been done before, but I figured it out. Right? There's no one I could refer to who's done the collection of things I had to do to publish the book. So how did I learn? Your adaptability comes from your ability to learn. So training your children to have the passion for learning is better than having somebody who just passes exams. Because true creativity in the job market, most of the things you'll be required to do are not in the textbook. How do you figure out the steps? How do you come up with that requirement? Or how do you meet the objective without any prior information?
It's about teaching our children to have open minds.
Open-mindedness and
to think through.
And to think through the process. Because one of the things I usually tell my juniors in the workplace is I can be able to solve 95% of my problems with 5% of the basic structure or knowledge or fundamentals of what it is I'm doing. And by being able to do that, I interrogate the remaining 95%. How do I solve this? So I'll give an example. My process is very simple. And especially in logical intelligence, I explain this. Simplify your process. I usually work with 6 questions, the universal questions. Who, why, what, where, when, and how. If I can interrogate this gap of information I have repeated times, how do I do this? Who has done it? Where do I get the information? What do I need to do? What do I need to improve? What skill sets do I lack? And get answers to those. You then now have a plan. Again, remember logic, sequence. So I start asking, so what is the first thing I need to learn? I go and learn that, bridge the gap. If I can't learn it, who has done it?
Who has done it?
How can I work on it? How can we come up with a sort of agreement that we both benefit? Even from a financial perspective, is it a profit share? Is it a co-agreement of some sort? such that we need to cater that aspect. How much is it going to cost? Is it too expensive? Is it so? By just asking, in fact, creativity is all about interrogating. The more you interrogate and the better questions, I usually say the quality of answers you get is determined by the quality of questions.
Questions that you're asking.
So by being able to do that, you'll be able to discover any gap.
And you know what we keep telling our children?
Yes.
Wacha kuniuliza maswali mengi.
Oh my goodness. In fact, that is one thing I tend to tell parents. Never say that to your children. And I'll give you a very interesting fact. How many questions have you asked in the last? Okay.
I don't know.
Can you put a number to it in the last week?
I can't tell. I don't know.
Can I give you an interesting fact?
Mm-hmm.
An average child between the age of 3 years to 7 years asks on average 300 questions a day.
Well, that I can testify from my children. Yes. I think it's even maybe more than 300.
It could be more. Now you have to. So it might be more, right? So most schools, most nannies, most parents, unaongea sana.
Hebu kwanza maliza chakula.
Kwanza maliza chakula. But you see, that's how they discover the world. So
at meal times.
Yes. Not really meal times, but generally.
No,
right?
I mean, like, when you need to eat is when you decide when all the questions can come.
Questions, right? And they ask them at the wrong time. So
Exactly.
they also need to work on timing.
Yes,
But
yes.
one of the things I've really, really appreciated with letting my daughter ask me questions is her growth has been tremendous for her age. It's interesting how once she asked me, where does rain come from?
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up learning the water cycle. Then she asked me, where does lighting come from? We ended up learning about electrostatic discharge.
Electrostatic.
I'm just explaining.
Mtoto ako na miaka ngapi?
Just out of the asking. So of course it was age appropriate, but
Yes.
she understood. We then understand. After that, we finished the water cycle. We went and learned about states of water, which is ice, because of asking. But most hiyo hawezi elewa. You're too young. Unauliza
Try,
maswali
but you
mengi.
will try.
Yes. So enable them to. If actually one of the best things you can do to your children is teach them how to ask quality questions. Their education is sorted, with or without a teacher.
Gosh, I
Yes.
think we need that and a facet of patience. With patience, one of the forms of intelligence. Hey.
I don't know, it's under emotional intelligence. How to deal with triggers. Those are actually not triggers.
Wow. Because those
Impatience
questions
is
can
a
come
trigger.
at the
Yes.
most. You're like,
I understand.
at this time, when you were meant to have done X, Y, Z.
Yes. And maybe just as a special note of that, if as a parent you don't know, be human. Show your children that you don't know everything, but discover with them.
Discover with
Yes.
them.
It will overcome that fear of failure in children at a very early age. Because if they see that this hero of mine doesn't know, but he was willing to discover with me, at the moment when I don't know, I can put my best foot forward and
Yeah,
go
you
through the
learn.
discovery process.
Wow. Judy, umechukua notes. Mbona tu umetuangalia sana? Sasa mtu akikuangalia ni kama shule. Unajua mtu akikuangalia sasa lazima uulize maswali ndio uhakikishe alikuwa anasikiza.
Ile mimi nilisikia creativity nikajua hiyo ni art and craft. I'm out of class.
That's not the limitation, and that's what I really
CBC,
want.
ukaanza kujua ni hizo CBC, Sisal, Skats, G-Shaker.
Yes. Nikajaribu kukumbuka wakati ambapo tulikuwa tunafundishwa that na vile tunaona watoto wetu wakifanya pale so called
Creative arts.
Sasa ndio najaribu kufikiria these things huwa tunaona unashangaa sasa wanataka kufundisha mtoto wangu awe mtu wa kuchora ama inamsaidia vipi, lakini sasa ukisikiliza it helps ile mtoto ni vile tu wazazi wengi huwa hatujui
hatuelewi. Unasikia pia unafaa kuwa creative katika ndoa, si ati kusema ati kila wakati huwezi kuniletea pesa hapa ndio tuende mahali mahali na pia pengine wewe ndio unaweza kupika chakula nzuri kushinda huko, kwa hiyo hoteli mnaenda pengine.
Yes. You know when you talk about creativity unapata kuna watu, let me give an example. Wanaume the husbands wale ambao huwa anapangiwa nguo
ndio hiyo,
and then unapewa mchanganyiko nyingine, ukienda pale nje mpaka mtu anashangaa, yani you see this man always anataka ajitafutie kwa sababu anajua kitafutiwa na bibi yake, ile combination atapewa. Sasa intelligence ni gani hapo? Imepotea hapo. Creativity ni nini? Imepotea
huko na visual, huko na
nini hata
visual. Sasa
hiyo ni visual la kalikosa mahali kuna rangi pengine hizi soma vizuri. What do you think? Ni rangi hapo, ni visual.
That's visual. So that one again you give hapo unampatia tu hongera kwa kuweza kupanga marangi vizuri. Ni kazi si rahisi.
Lakini unajua hapo ndio Judy tunasema ni kusaidiana. Ukiona mtu mahali yani hapo kuna venye anaweza saidiwa msaidie. Si ati kusema nawe mbona unavaa nguo hivi. Huwezi kuona hii na hii haiendi, haimatch. Sasa pole hata uambiwi na mtu, unamwekea tu nguo hapo kwa kitanda, unamwambia my dear, kesho ukiamka ni hizi nimekupangia. Hizi ndio naona zinakutoa kabisa, uko smart kabisa. Lakini sikumwambia wewe kuna shida. Wewe huwezi kuona hii ni red na yellow ziendani vizuri hata uone. Baadaye unaongelesha pole. Ni lugha. Auditory. Ulisema
unavyotumia lugha.
Ili unatumia lugha.
Uelewe ndimi yako yaweza kusababisha vita ama kuongeza mapenzi. So unavyotumia maneno yako yatahakikisha vile maneno yatatokea.
Na wanawake hapo.
So na mkwe uangalifu sana kabla ulipuke. Fikiria kwanza unataka matokeo ya mazungumzo yawe gani? Unataka mapenzi ama unataka vita? Wewe amua.
Unajua haya mazungumzo na msikilizaji ni vizuri uelewe ya kwamba si jambo geni ambalo linazungumziwa hapa. It is there. I think sana tunasema Naliza hajachanuka. Umesikia vile amejibu mume wake hapo? Naliza hapo hajaonekana akiwa mtu mwerevu. Unajua vile tunasema wakati ambapo unazungumzia mtu pale, yani mtu amesikia anasema huyo anaonekana bado huyo ni kama bado ako manual na watu wako digital kiasi siku hizi. So haya ndio yale mambo ambayo tunazungumzia, creativity yako. So now sasa mahali ambapo tumefika, how do we learn?
Si ndio unaelezewa na
sasa nimeeleza kuna kitu
wale wako shule wasome au wako huko nje.
Sasa vile nimekueleza, unajua kile mimi wanasema katika hii maisha hakikisha uko na uwezo wa kuendeleza kusoma ama kujirevusha kwa sababu maisha ni marefu. Kibaki tu pale upo, yale kuleta hapa hata kufikisha pale unapostahili kufika. Kwa hivyo hata katika ndoa yako, katika uhusiano wako na watu wengine, lazima uhakikishe unajiendeleza pia kibinafsi. Kwa hivyo uweze kupata kusoma, na nimeandikisha kitabu. Kwa hivyo unaweza kipata, Liza atawapatia link muweze kuhakikisha mnaweza kukipata.
Unajua pia Lucy, nakuita Lucy kwa sababu kuna mtu amenitumia message hapa naisoma. Unaona hiyo multitasking sasa haisaidii. Anasema pia anasema we need this book. Sorry, nasoma message ya mtu hapa anasema we need this book. Pia unajua pia ni vile huwa sisi tu tunaenda shule. Tukimaliza shule si kusema tunaweka vitabu na tunasahau na tunaendelea na maisha. Tunashinda tukijiendeleza, hekima, wisdom comes from learning. So I think this is what you're telling us, John. Tuendelee tu kupata masomo, tusiseme tu ni hayo tuliyajua shule na tuweke hizo vitabu kando.
Na hata mimi naambia watu wengi sana, lazima uelewe kile umeenda kufanya shule ni kuelewa vile kusoma. Ndio sasa ukianza maisha baada ya masomo ya chuo kikuu, mambo yatabadilika. Itabidi kuweza kubadilika pia uweze kupata namna ya kuelewa hayo mambo mabadiliko. Lakini ukibaki na yale yalibaki kitambo, kuna wale watu walikuwa wanatengeneza Nokia. Walikuwa wakubwa sana. Lakini sasa mtu anasikia Nokia popote.
Angalia simu hata.
Simu zimebadilika.
Hizi phone book
na vidude, kulikuwa na ile phone book, ile transmitter kubwa, tukaenda zile vidude, sasa ni touch screen.
Na hata siku hizi hata tunaambiwa tutaacha hizi simu tuanze kuongea na mkono hivi.
Kuna mtu mali anatengeneza hiyo creative thinking.
Niliona video juzi, mtu anaongea tu kwa simu na anaongea tu na unaona akifanya tu akiangalia mkono hivi na anaongea na napigia mtu simu na anajibu.
Na hiyo ndio mabadiliko. Mtu atakuwa anatengeneza simu lazima aweze kujifunza kutengeneza hayo mpya. Kwa hivyo ukibaki na ile ulikuwa nayo umepata mwaka 1000 wa kitambo, utapata umekwama. Kwa
hivyo ukikubali kuachwa nyuma, utaachwa nyuma peke yako.
So focus, utanisema katika lugha ya Kimombo, focus on lifelong learning. Ndio kwa maana mimi najiita intern of life. I am always perpetually curious, always perpetually learning and adapting and adjusting to the changes of life.
So pia hivyo pia kwa ndoa tuendelee maisha kama hayo. Tushinde tukijuana. Tushinde tukipata kujua mazuri ambayo yanaweza kutuendeleza katika maisha yetu ya ndoa.
Kwa sababu pia wewe utabadilika, yale vitu yalikuwa nakufurahisha kitambo utapata sasa labda yamebadilika. Na mwenzako pia.
Uhuru Park sasa unamwambia huku ndio umeleta tena shwari. Si tumepanda bei hata sufai. Yenyewe hata hapo nimekubali. Si Uhuru Park pekee. Unajua sasa sisi tumepata kujua mengi na boat riding. Judy, sijui kama kuna mengine kutoka upande wako. Unajua naangalia masaa pia. Uko karibu kutufukuza hapa.
Niko karibu kuwaomba tusali pamoja sala ya malaika wa Bwana. Lakini kabla nifanye hivyo, nawashukuru sana kupata nafasi ya kuwa pamoja nasi katika studio zetu. Sasa hapa Liz, naona utakuwa na kibarua kiasi. Unajua kusoma kitabu, it's interesting wakati ambapo mnasoma mkiwa kama kikundi, people who share the same interest. Unaona watu ambao wanataka kuimarisha na kuleta fun na furaha katika ndoa yao. Mnakuja pamoja, tunasoma kitabu kama hicho cha Bwana Kelo Pani. Tunachanuana pale sababu sasa kuna wengine wanakuwa na challenge akisikia kusoma kitabu. Chapter moja nitamaliza kwa hiyo.
Nitaweza.
I know this you will help us.
Lakini unajua pia Judy pia, wacha pia unajua tulipata kutoka zamani tulikuwa tunaonyeshwa kusoma ni kama punishment.
Ni punishment, yes.
Si kusoma kwa kutaka. Sasa ndio tunasema hata watoto wetu tuwafundishe ya kwamba kusoma ni kitu kizuri. Si ati unalazimishwa, ni kitu ambacho yani ukiamka unasema leo nitafanya hivi na hivi na pia nimepanga kusoma kitabu fulani. Yani iwe kitu ya kuangalia, yani unaipenda, si kitu ya kuona sasa mbona unanipatia mateso kama hayo. So I think also that perspective on reading books needs to change.
Absolutely.
Tuone kwa kuna mazuri
sana.
Kuna kusoma.
Unajua labda naweza sema haya kwa sababu nakumbuka wakati tulimaliza kidato cha 4, watu wengi walisoma kitabu. Walichukua kachoma.
Walichoma.
Sitawahi soma tena kwa sababu unachukulia ni kitu kigumu, lakini tunafaa kubadilisha hayo ndio uweze kujiendeleza kimaisha.
Hizo fikra ndio sio nzuri.
Sio nzuri.
Tunafaa kuendelea kusoma katika maisha yetu
Kabisa.
Mpaka tukufe. Till the day we die.
Ndio.
Kwa upande wangu nimesema asante sana John Akelo. We are very grateful. We'll share the link to this book ndio ule ambaye amepata kusikia hii mazungumzo yetu aweze kununua hichi kitabu, The Creative Thinking, the 8 Facets, A Journey Through the 8 Facets of Intelligence. Yeah. Na asante sana kwa kutupatia muda wako, your time.
Karibu sana.
And your mind. Those thoughts. You know you've shared your mind through this book. Those thoughts we are very grateful. Asante sana.
Karibu.
Judy.
Thank you so much Liz and Bwana John. Tunashukuru sana. Asante sana msikilizaji pia kuendelea kuitegea idhaa hii ya Radio Maria Kenya Nairobi, sauti ya Kikristo nyumbani mwako. Na zimekatika dakika 2 baada ya saa 6 kamili. Tujiandae tusali pamoja sala ya malaika wa Bwana.
Radio Maria Kenya Nairobi 107.3 FM.